speechlessness has never been a trait of Larry Bird's. The man who famously informed #defenders exactly where he was going to shoot before actually doing it, spoke his way to 3 NBA titles, and once forced Michael Jordan to urge his teammates to stop talking has always had something to say. However, things were different this time. The greatest trash talker in NBA history was stunned speechless by Michael Jordan's passionate, unexpected, and profoundly respectful remark. This has nothing to do with competition or the never-ending argument over brilliance. The basketball world will never forget the moment when one legend honored another. Over the years, the French Open has hosted a wide range of famous people, including international rock stars and opera giants. However, none could have predicted what would happen when Asia's songbird, Regine Velasquez, showed up at the French Open. After selling out Carnegie Hall, performing for presidents, and becoming known as the voice of a generation, the 56-year-old legend accomplished something she had never done before. She entered Suzanne Lenglen's court on a calm afternoon in Paris, grabbed a microphone, and performed a moving song for a 21-year-old tennis player who had just lost in the opening round. Everyone in attendance was taken aback by the moving tribute. The audience was moved to tears as the last notes reverberated across the stadium, rather than just cheering. Every moment of it was recorded by the cameras. Throughout her incredible ascension, Alex Eala, the teenage star who had battled elite opponents fearlessly and carried the aspirations of millions of Filipino fans, stood motionless. As she strained to comprehend what was happening in front of her eyes, her hand rested against her heart. It took place in Paris, France, on May 27, 2026. 47 p.m. on Court Suzanne Lenglen, and everything changed in an instant that no one in the crowd could have foreseen. You must visualize the scene in order to comprehend the significance of what transpired. Alex Eala's career in the French Open was already over. She was still thinking about her first-round defeat against Iva Jovic and wondering what may have been. Only a day before, the Philippine flags that had crowded the stands were suddenly folded, placed in baggage, and transported to airport terminals. The hope of a strong tournament run had gradually faded throughout the night in Paris. Eala had gone back to the grounds just to watch tennis, to sit among the spectators and re-establish her connection to the sport she loved, even on the days when it caused her heartache, in an attempt to temporarily escape the disappointment. The last thing she expected was to be the center of attention once more. Fans flocked to Court Suzanne Lenglen to witness a thrilling match between two emerging talents in the second round. Every point elicited a roar from the stands, as flags waved throughout the stadium, creating a buzz of excitement. With her mother by her side and her coaches a few rows behind, Eala sat calmly in the player's box. She was making every effort to blend in with the surroundings, wearing a basic white hoodie, her hair tied up, and no cosmetics on her face. She wanted nothing more than to be simply another fan in the crowd for the first time in days. The music then started. It wasn't the well-known sound of a pre-recorded song or stadium anthem reverberating over the speakers. This was something different, something personal, strong, and unavoidable. Clear and distinct, a voice emerged from the middle of the court, resonating throughout the entire stadium. Everyone's attention was immediately caught by the opening notes. Fans ceased to converse. They raised phones into the air. As players and onlookers turned to face the source of the sound in bewilderment and surprise, even the game itself appeared to pause. Regine Velasquez was standing close to the baseline, holding a microphone. The songbird of Asia has reached. Roland Garros. The renowned performer, who had enthralled audiences all across the world for decades, packed esteemed concert halls, sang for presidents, and emerged as one of the most renowned voices of her generation. During some of the most iconic events in Filipino history, she performed for millions of people. She had never done something quite like this, though, despite all of her achievements. She had never set foot on a tennis court to pay tribute to a young athlete who had just suffered the heartbreak of losing in the first round of a Grand Slam. An amazing silence descended upon the throng as her words reverberated across the stadium. Thousands of onlookers listened in silence. The players were motionless. Alex Eala was swiftly located by cameras, and the expression on her face conveyed the whole narrative. Tears filled her eyes, and her hand shot to her mouth. She seemed overwhelmed, finding it difficult to understand what was going on. What had started off as a typical Roland Garros afternoon had evolved into a very intimate homage honoring her tenacity, bravery, and the role she had played as an example to countless others. The crowd erupted as the last note vanished into the Paris air. Fans stood up, and court Suzanne Lenglen heard thunderous acclaim. However, the performance was just the start. Regine Velasquez looked to the player's box after lowering the microphone. She started going straight toward the young tennis player, who had come to represent pride and hope for millions of Filipinos worldwide, with purpose in her step and emotion in her eyes. "This is for you, Alex," she added in a soft yet powerful voice that could be heard throughout the quiet stadium. "Not because you prevailed, but because you battled. Since you never gave up. Because you served as a reminder to everyone that you are not a loser just because you lose a match." She then reached out to the young tennis player. Time appeared to stop for a split second. As the voice of a generation, Regine Velasquez stood on the renowned red clay of Roland Garros and reached out to a player whose tournament adventure had ended much sooner than she had intended. The cameras filmed every moment. It was a picture that would soon be on television screens and social media platforms all around the world. Alex Eala got up slowly from her chair. She stretched forward and grasped Regine's hand as her legs shook and tears welled up in her eyes. She was overcome with emotion and found it difficult to speak. "I'm at a loss for words," she said. Regine gave a kind grin. She said, "You don't have to say anything. Just keep battling. Continue being who you are. Everything else will work itself out." Shortly after, she drew Alex into a passionate hug. Cheers broke out from the audience. Chants of encouragement reverberated around the court as flags were waved across the stands. Suzanne Lenglen. The cheers weren't for a historic upset or a championship win. It was for fortitude, bravery, and a young athlete who didn't let failure define her. Even though the experience was brief, just a few seconds, its effects would last much longer. Fans who witnessed more than just a straightforward conversation between a singer and an athlete shared the video millions of times as it quickly gained popularity. They witnessed a lesson that tenacity can motivate people even in the face of failure and that character is just as important as outcomes. Around 10 in the morning on May 28, 2026, the next day. The spotlight has vanished. Alex Eala was seated across from Regine Velasquez in a calm cafe close to Roland Garros. Even though the two Filipinos had never met before that week, they already formed a bond that went beyond simple friendship. The cafe was quiet and almost deserted since the breakfast crowd had long since left. The proprietor, a Filipino expat who recognized both women right away, had kindly booked a separate room for them and demanded that their dinner be provided. Cups of steaming coffee and plates of typical Filipino breakfast food quickly reached the table. Then, acknowledging the importance of the occasion, he discreetly moved away, giving them space to converse, contemplate, and exchange tales away from the cameras that had recorded the remarkable event only hours before. Alex Eala had hardly slept at all. She was still disappointed by her loss, and she couldn't stop thinking about what may have happened. However, as she sat across from Regine Velasquez, the woman whose voice had accompanied so many of her childhood memories, the burden she had been carrying started to give way to a sense of relief. Was peaceful and private, far away from the camera's gaze and the din of the tennis courts. "Thank you," Alex murmured, "for coming, for singing, for giving me a sense of accomplishment." Grinning, Regine reached across the table and took Alex's hand tenderly. "Alex, you didn't fail," she answered. "You were defeated in a tennis match. That isn't a failure. Giving up is a sign of failure, and you've never done that. I came for precisely that reason." Regine's eyes strayed for a second as she considered her own path. She went on, "I've been where you are. In my profession, not on a tennis court. I've put out albums that didn't go as well as I had hoped. I've had performances that weren't my finest. Critics have told me that my time was over. There were times when I wanted to leave everything behind. However, I didn't because giving up would have been a failure. Making errors, losing, and struggling are all aspects of the path." Alex paid close attention, taking in every word. "How did you manage to continue?" she inquired. Regine grinned and leaned back. "I recalled my motivation for beginning. I recalled my passion for my work, the happiness it brought me, and the people who supported me when I wasn't always able to believe in myself. That is precisely what you must keep in mind. Imagine the supporters flying banners on your behalf. Consider the individuals who watch every game, every win, and every defeat. They don't just support you based on your performance. Your heart, your effort, and your determination to keep fighting are the reasons they are rooting for you." Before continuing, Alex briefly lowered her gaze. She spoke in a barely audible whisper. Tita Regine said, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I won't ever achieve a Grand Slam. I'm afraid that people will always think of me as the player who almost succeeded but fell short. Between them, the confession lingered. It has nothing to do with the anxiety of losing a single game. Every athlete who dares to dream big shares this fear, the possibility that their biggest ambition would always remain just out of grasp. And Alex let herself speak it out for the first time since coming to Paris. After paying close attention, Regine responded in a way that Alex would never forget. She whispered softly, maybe you'll win a Grand Slam one day, and maybe you won't. However, that is not the most important thing. It matters that you continue to inspire the millions of people who recognize themselves in your journey and that you continue to show up and fight. She grinned and gave Alex's hand a squeeze. The Alex Eala effect is that winning every game is not the goal. It involves bravery, tenacity, and a will to give up. In that sense, you're already a champion. They ate breakfast for almost 2 hours. They discussed music, tennis, dreams, family, and the common experiences of representing the Philippines abroad. Regine talked about her early career difficulties, doubts, disappointments, and times when she wondered if she should keep on. Alex paid close attention, taking in every memory and instruction. When it was finally time to leave, what had started out as a straightforward breakfast turned into a discussion about resiliency, purpose, and the responsibility that comes with inspiring others. Regine reached into her bag and gave Alex a small box, saying, "Open it later." Alex nodded, overcome with emotion and at a loss for words. That evening, back in her hotel room, she carefully opened the gift, which was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like the Philippines. It was elegant in its simplicity, but what drew her attention were the words engraved on the back in delicate script, Laban, always. You're not by yourself. Alex just gazed at the jewelry for a few moments. She then put it around her neck. It was more than jewelry in that moment. It served as a reminder of what she had discovered during those trying times in Paris. A representation of tenacity, faith, and the innumerable people who support her. Long after the tournament was over, she would wear it for the rest of her time in France. It would go with her to practices, games, triumphs, and setbacks. She would touch the necklace and recall the inscription on its back, which stated that she was never carrying the load alone, whenever doubt began to creep into her thoughts. The French Open progressed in the meantime. Eventually, new champions would hoist trophies on the renowned red clay as new stars rose to prominence and new narratives developed. However, a championship game or trophy presentation would not rank among the tournament's most memorable moments for many spectators. The tournament would go on, new champions would be crowned, new headlines would dominate the sports pages, and new stories would capture the attention of the world. However, long after the final trophy was lifted, Alex Eala would take something much more personal home with her. The gold necklace around her neck and the memory of the woman who had given it to her. On May 29, 2026, at 17 a.m., Alex arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport, ready to leave Paris behind. It would be the tale of a young strength after defeat and the unexpected act of kindness. Officially, she was leaving the tournament without having won anything. However, she was departing with something far more significant on an emotional level than a spot in the draw. The words and music that had given her confidence back were still in her heart, and a gold pendant shaped like the Philippines hung around her neck. The airport was a hive of activity. Tourists got ready for their trips home, business executives checked flight itineraries, and travelers rushed toward departure gates. However, a small group of people had assembled for a different purpose next to the Philippine Airlines check-in area. They weren't celebs looking for attention or reporters chasing headlines. They were common Filipinos who worked and lived overseas as nurses, carers, engineers, students, and families. They had come only to bid farewell to an inspiration. They had Philippine flags in their hands. They carried signs that were made by hand. As they watched her approach, some of them suppressed their emotions. You made us proud, Alex. When you return, we'll be here. Always Laban. Through the terminal, the words trailed behind her. Alex welcomed each supporter individually, her mother walking by her with her racket bag slung over one shoulder. She could feel the etched message against her skin each time the pendant touched her chest. Always Laban. You're not by yourself. She was nevertheless disappointed by her loss. The questioning persisted. She was still thinking about the lost chances. However, she started to realize something significant as she turned to face the face that was waiting for her. Victories had never been the only reason for their admiration. They had come because they had faith in her path, her tenacity, and her resolve to fight till the very end. Then a young girl emerged from the front of the gathering. Her age could not have exceeded 10 years. She held a sheet of notebook paper with vibrant crayon drawings on it. The image depicted a tennis player wearing a crown with brilliant yellow lines, clutching a racket beneath the Philippine flag. The young girl glanced up anxiously, then held out the sketch. She whispered, "I made this for you." The sound of the airport appeared to go away for a time. Alex carefully examined every crayon mark and uneven line as he accepted the drawing. What she saw was more than just a photo. It was evidence that her journey had touched people she had never met, that her effort mattered despite what the scoreboard indicated, and that inspiration frequently spreads farther than success. Alex felt tears welling up in her eyes once more as she stood in the middle of a busy airport thousands of miles from home. But this time, the tears were ones of thankfulness rather than disappointment. "You're my hero, even when you lose," the young girl said with a smile as she glanced up at Alex. No standing ovation or applause could ever match the impact of those remarks. Alex bent over and took the crayon sketches.